Picture this: the year is 1492 and you're standing on a wooden deck that creaks beneath your feet with each gentle roll of the ocean. The salt air fills your lungs as you grip the rough rope rigging, and somewhere in the distance beyond the endless blue horizon lies a mystery that will change the world forever. But here's the question that keeps you awake during your night watch. What if everything you thought you knew about the world was about to be turned upside down? You see, you've been at sea for what feels like an eternity, following a man with wild eyes and wilder dreams sailing toward what he promises is the Indies. But as the weeks have stretched into months and the familiar coastlines of Europe have long disappeared behind you, you can't help but wonder, what exactly are you sailing toward? The bread in your hands has turned hard as stone, the water barrels taste of wood and time, and your fellow sailors whisper doubts when the captain isn't listening. Yet something in your chest, maybe it's hope, maybe it's just the rhythm of the waves, tells you that this journey will be unlike anything the world has ever seen. If you're ready to discover what happens when three small ships carry brave souls into the unknown, a quick like helps other dreamers find this adventure too. Now let yourself settle back comfortably. Feel the gentle rocking motion of the ship beneath you as we return to that pivotal moment in history. You are a sailor aboard the Santa Maria, and your story, your incredible world-changing story, is about to unfold. You are Miguel Santos, a young sailor from the port town of Palos de la Frontera, where the cobblestone streets smell of salt and fish, and where the sound of hammers on ship hulls echoes from dawn to dusk. Your hands, calloused from years of rope work and rough labor, bear the permanent stains of tar and the pale lines of old cuts that tell the story of a life spent working with hemp and wood and iron. This morning, as the grey dawn clouds part to reveal fingers of golden sunlight reaching across the harbour, you stand on the deck of the Santa Maria, feeling the solid oak planking beneath your bare feet with a mixture of familiarity and anticipation. The ship beneath you is more than wood and nails, it's a living thing that breathes with the tide, that speaks in the creaking of timbers and the whisper of wind through rigging. Every plank has been shaped by craftsmen who understand that lives depend on their work, every joint sealed with pitch that fills the morning air with its distinctive, comforting aroma. The Santa Maria is not the largest ship you've sailed, but she's solid built for the kind of long voyages that test both wood and men. Your sailor's belt, made from rope you braided yourself during long watches on previous voyages, holds the few possessions that matter to a man who owns nothing but his skill and his determination. There's the wooden cup, carved from olive wood, its surface smooth from years of use, stained dark from countless meals of ship's wine and water. Your knife, with its bone handle, worn to fit your grip, perfectly sharp enough to splice rope or prepare food, essential as your own hands for the work ahead. And wrapped carefully in oiled cloth, the letter from your mother, written in the careful script of a woman who learned her letters late in life, the ink now faded, but the love in every word as clear as the day she pressed it into your hands at the dock. You've read that letter so many times during the preparations for this voyage that you could recite every word from memory. She writes of the small garden behind your childhood home, where she grows the beans and onions that supplement the family's meager income. She mentions your younger sister's upcoming marriage to the blacksmith's son, a good match that will ensure she's cared for when your mother grows too old for her work mending nets. And always at the end, the same prayer: may God watch over you on whatever waters you sail and bring you safely home to those who love you. The ship beneath your feet represents more than adventure. It's opportunity, the chance for a sailor's son to see lands that exist only in the imaginations of scholars, to return with stories and perhaps enough coin to buy a small boat of your own, to move from crew to owner, from follower to leader. But as you stand here in the early morning light, watching the sun climb higher above the familiar coastline of Spain, you feel the weight of uncertainty that comes with every great endeavor. Christopher Columbus. Cristobal Colon, to those who serve under him, stands near the helm like a figure carved from the same oak as the ship itself. His weathered face, marked by years of sun and salt air, turns constantly toward the western horizon with an intensity that speaks of obsession as much as confidence. His eyes, deep set and dark, hold a fire that has sustained him through years of rejection by learned men and royal courts, a flame that now burns bright enough to light the way across unknown seas. You've heard the stories about this man whispered in taverns and repeated in the markets where sailors gather to share news. Some say he's a visionary, a man touched by divine inspiration who will open new routes to the wealth of the East. Others claim he's a madman leading good men to their deaths in pursuit of impossible dreams. But watching him now, seeing the calm certainty with which he studies his charts and issues his orders, you find yourself believing in something larger than the man himself, believing in the possibility that the world might be different from what everyone assumes, that courage and determination might indeed carry a ship beyond the edge of all known maps. The morning air carries all the familiar scents of a Spanish harbor, the salt and seaweed of the tide, the tar and hemp of ship maintenance, the smoke from cooking fires on shore where families prepare the first meal of the day. But underneath these familiar aromas you detect something else, the scent of possibility, of standing at the edge of the unknown, of being part of something that will echo through history long after your bones have returned to Spanish soil. The deck beneath your feet tells stories in every weathered plank. These boards, cut from ancient Spanish oaks that grew in forests older than memory, have been shaped and fitted by master shipwrights who learned their craft from fathers and grandfathers, stretching back through generations of maritime tradition. The wood is smooth from countless hours of sailors' bare feet, moving in the eternal dance of shipboard life, testing rigging, adjusting sails, maintaining the complex network of ropes and blocks that transforms wind into forward motion. Each plank bears the subtle indentations and wear patterns that speak of men who have worked these decks through calm seas and fierce storms, through scorching tropical sun and cold northern rain. This morning, the deck planks are damp with dew that catches the early sunlight like scattered diamonds, each drop a tiny prism that breaks the golden light into miniature rainbows before evaporating in the warming air. The dampness carries with it the scent of the wood itself, oak that has been seasoned by salt air and treated with the pitch and tar that seal the joints against the endless assault of seawater. It's a smell that every sailor knows by heart, as familiar and comforting as the scent of his mother's cooking or the particular fragrance of his hometown streets after rain. You can feel every timber groan and flex as the Atlantic swells lift and lower the Santa Maria in the endless hypnotic rhythm that is both the sailor's lullaby and his constant companion. The ship moves with the organic flexibility of a living thing, responding to the sea's moods with the grace that comes from perfect construction and perfect balance. Each wave that passes beneath the hull transmits its energy through the wood, up through the deck, into your feet and legs and body until you become part of the ship's breathing part of its conversation with the sea. The sensation is both powerful and peaceful, this constant motion that landlubbers find unsettling, but that feels to an experienced sailor like being rocked in the arms of something vast and protective. The ship doesn't fight the waves. Instead, she dances with them, rising and falling in perfect harmony with forces that dwarf any human construction, yet somehow welcome this small wooden vessel as part of their eternal rhythm. Captain Christopher Columbus stands like a monument to determination itself, his figure commanding attention not through size, he is not a particularly large man, but through the sheer intensity of his presence. His weathered face bears the marks of a life spent studying horizons, calculating distances, dreaming of routes that exist only in his imagination. Deep lines radiate from the corners of his eyes, carved there by years of squinting into sun and wind, searching for signs that other men cannot see. His hands, when he gestures toward the western horizon, move with the certainty of a man who has spent countless hours tracing routes on charts, measuring distances with compass and ruler, calculating the provisions needed for voyages that have never been attempted. When Columbus speaks of the golden cities of Cathay, his voice carries the weight of absolute conviction. He doesn't merely believe in the existence of these places, he can describe them with the precision of a man who has walked their streets in his dreams. The palaces of the great Khan rise in his imagination like structures built from solid gold and precious stones, their gardens filled with spices worth more than entire European kingdoms. The ports he envisions teem with merchants eager to trade their exotic goods for European crafts and ideas, creating wealth that will flow back across the Atlantic to make Spain the envy of all nations. But you've been to sea before, sailed on trading vessels that hugged the familiar coastlines of Europe, and you understand in your bones how vast and mysterious the ocean truly is. You've seen storms that rise from clear skies, with no warning waves that tower higher than cathedral spires, calms that stretch for days until the very air seems to forget how to move. You know that the sea keeps its own counsel, follows its own laws, and shows mercy or cruelty according to logic that no human mind can fully comprehend. Yet there's something about Columbus's confidence that transcends rational analysis. It's not the desperate optimism of a man whistling in the dark, nor the false bravado of someone trying to convince himself as much as others. Instead, it's the unshakable certainty that you sometimes see in master craftsmen who know their work so thoroughly that they can shape wood or stone without conscious thought, or inexperienced pilots who can navigate familiar waters by the feel of currents and the behavior of seabirds. Columbus speaks of these unknown waters with the familiarity of someone who has already sailed them 1,000 times in his imagination. The smell of the ship surrounds you like a familiar embrace, layers of aroma that tell the story of countless voyages and the eternal cycle of maritime life. The sharp, clean scent of tar mingles with the earthier smell of hemp rope, creating the basic foundation that every sailor recognizes as the perfume of his profession. The wood itself contributes its own note oak that has been seasoned by salt air until it has become something more than mere timber, something that seems to hold within its grain the memory of every wave it has met, every storm it has weathered. Beneath these primary scents lie others more subtle but no less important to the ship's identity. The metallic tang of iron fittings that have been heated and shaped by smiths who understand that sailors' lives depend on the strength of every nail, every hinge, every piece of hardware that holds the vessel together. The faint sweetness of the pitch used to seal the spaces between planks, preventing the sea from reclaiming what human hands have built. The lingering aroma of the last hot meal cooked in the ship's galley, perhaps a stew of salted pork and dried peas, seasoned with the precious herbs that make ship food bearable, and cooked in iron pots that have served hundreds of similar meals on dozens of previous voyages. Your stomach responds to the memory of that meal with a soft rumble, reminding you that fresh food has already become a precious memory, even though you've been at sea for only a few weeks. But mixed with the hunger is something more complex, an excitement that makes your pulse quicken and your senses more acute. There's adventure in the air, possibility hanging like morning mist over the endless water, the tantalizing promise of discovering something that will change not just your own life, but the understanding of the world itself. Santos calls Juan de la Cosa the ship's master and owner, his voice carrying the particular blend of authority and warmth that marks truly exceptional leaders of men. Juan is a man whose reputation extends throughout every port in Spain, not just for his skill as a navigator and his knowledge of ship construction, but for the loyalty he inspires in every sailor who has ever served under his command. His voice, weathered by years of shouting orders over the sound of wind and waves, nevertheless carries clearly across the deck without harshness, drawing your attention with the respect that experience commands rather than the fear that comes from mere rank. You turn toward him, your bare feet finding their practiced grip on the deck with the unconscious skill that separates true sailors from landlubbers who happen to be on ships. Every step is automatically adjusted for the ship's motion, every movement calculated to maintain balance regardless of how the vessel might roll or pitch in response to the sea's mood. Your body has learned to read the subtle cues that predict each movement, the way the wind shifts across your face, the particular creak of rigging under stress, the almost imperceptible changes in the deck's angle that announce an approaching wave. "Come help me check the rigging on the mainmast." Juan continues his tone, making it clear that this is more than routine maintenance. In his voice you hear the careful attention of a man who knows that every rope, every knot, every piece of hardware on this ship represents not just functionality but survival. A single failed line at the wrong moment could mean the difference between safely reaching your destination and being swallowed by the endless waters of the Atlantic. As you work alongside Juan, your fingers automatically test each rope for signs of wear, while your mind focuses on the conversation that develops naturally between men who share dangerous work. The hemp rope in your hands tells its own story, thick and strong, twisted with the skill of rope makers who learned their craft from masters stretching back through generations of maritime tradition. The fibers have been treated with tar to resist the rot that comes from constant exposure to salt spray, and the entire length has been worked and stretched until it has achieved the perfect balance between flexibility and strength. Each strand of the rope has been laid with care, twisted to distribute stress evenly throughout its length, designed to hold firm under the enormous forces generated when wind fills the sails and the ship drives forward through heavy seas. Your hands can read the rope's condition through touch feeling for the soft spots that indicate internal damage, testing for the brittleness that comes when hemp has been stretched beyond its limits, checking for the fraying that warns of imminent failure. The work creates its own rhythm, your hands moving with practiced efficiency, while your mind remains free to contemplate larger questions. The routine of checking and testing, of maintaining the complex system that keeps the ship functional and safe, provides a meditative quality that many landlubbers fail to understand. There's peace in work that matters, satisfaction in the knowledge that your attention to detail contributes directly to the safety of every man aboard the vessel. Juan leans close as you work, his voice dropping to the confidential tone that sailors use when discussing matters that require discretion. The sound of your joint labor, the whisper of rope through your hands, the soft creaking of the rigging as it adjusts to the ship's movement, the distant splash of waves against the hull provides natural cover for conversation that's meant to remain private. "What do you make of our captain's confidence, young Miguel?" he asks, his weathered face turning briefly toward the figure of Columbus before returning to focus on the rope he's examining. He speaks as if he's sailed these waters before, as if the route to the Indies is as familiar to him as the path from Palos to Cadiz. The question deserves careful consideration, and you find yourself pausing in your work to think before responding. The hemp rope in your hands provides a familiar anchor for your thoughts, something solid and practical to hold on to while contemplating questions that stretch beyond the physical world into realms of faith and possibility and human nature. Juan's question touches on something that has been occupying your own thoughts during the quiet watches of the night, when the ship moves through darkness toward an unknown dawn, and a man has time to wonder what forces are shaping his destiny. Columbus's confidence is indeed remarkable, not the desperate optimism of someone trying to convince himself, but the deep certainty that comes from knowledge gained through sources that other men cannot access. He studies his charts every night. You reply quietly, your voice pitched to carry only to Juan's ears, while remaining aware that other sailors work nearby and that conversations between crew members can take unexpected directions if they're overheard by the wrong people. I've seen him making calculations by candlelight, measuring distances with his compass, comparing the observations recorded by other navigators with his own theories about the shape of the world. The memory is clear in your mind. Columbus bent over his charts in the dim glow of a single candle, his finger tracing routes across blank areas of parchment, his lips moving silently as he performs calculations that involve mathematics beyond your formal education, but which clearly make perfect sense to him. The intensity of his concentration during these sessions is remarkable, as if he's not merely studying maps but communing with something larger than geography, drawing confidence from sources that exist beyond the physical evidence. He believes, Juan, you continue testing another section of rope while organizing your thoughts. Whether he's right or not about the exact location of the Indies, whether his calculations about distances and sailing times prove accurate, he truly believes in the possibility of success. And I've learned in my short time at sea that belief can be a more powerful force than knowledge. Juan nods thoughtfully, his weathered face creasing into the kind of smile that comes from years of experience with the unpredictable nature of both the sea and the men who sail upon it. His hands continue their methodical examination of the rigging, but his attention is clearly focused on the deeper implications of your conversation. The older sailor nods thoughtfully, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Belief is powerful at sea, Miguel. It can carry a ship farther than the strongest wind. He tests the rope one final time, satisfied with its condition. But it's hope that keeps sailors alive when belief runs out. The sun climbs higher, transforming the quality of light from the soft gold of dawn to the brilliant white radiance of mid-morning. The change brings with it a shift in the ship's atmosphere as the Santa Maria settles into the familiar, comforting routine of ocean voyaging that has sustained sailors since the first humans dared to venture beyond sight of land. This routine is more than simple organization. It's a carefully choreographed dance between human needs and maritime realities. A system developed through centuries of trial and error by men who learned that survival at sea depends on transforming chaos into order, uncertainty into predictable patterns that the mind can embrace even when the horizon offers nothing but endless water. You move through your assigned tasks with the practiced efficiency of a young man who has learned to read the sea's moods through subtle signs that landlubbers never notice. The morning watch brings with it a series of responsibilities that must be completed with both speed and thoroughness. Checking the compass to ensure that the ship maintains her proper heading, testing the depth of water in the hold to verify that the vessel remains sound and watertight, examining every sail to ensure that it's properly set to catch the favorable winds that will carry you steadily westward toward whatever lies beyond the edge of the known world. Your hands know this work without conscious thought now, guided by muscle memory that has been developed through months of repetition until the complex tasks of seamanship have become as natural as walking. The rough wood of the ship's wheel carries the oil and wear patterns of countless hands that have gripped it through calm seas and fierce storms, and when you test its movement, you can feel the direct connection between your touch and the massive rudder that steers the entire vessel through the water. The precise knots that secure the rigging represent generations of maritime knowledge distilled into practical form, each twist and loop designed to hold fast under enormous stress while remaining possible to untie when conditions require adjustment. Your fingers move through these knots with the automatic precision of a craftsman, testing tension, checking for signs of slippage, ensuring that every connection between rope and sail and mast will hold firm when the wind rises and the sea grows heavy. The balance required to move safely about the deck as the ship rolls from side to side has become second nature, your body automatically adjusting to the vessel's motion without conscious thought. Every step is calculated to work with the ship's movement rather than against it, every handhold chosen to provide security without interfering with the work that must be done. You've learned to read the rhythm of the waves through the deck beneath your feet, to anticipate each roll and pitch, to move with the ship rather than fighting against forces that are far stronger than any human body. The other sailors move about their duties with similar quiet efficiency, creating a scene that would seem chaotic to untrained eyes, but which actually represents perfect organization adapted to the unique demands of life at sea. Every man knows his responsibilities, every task fits into a larger pattern that ensures the ship's safety and progress. Every movement contributes to the collective effort that will carry this small wooden vessel across thousands of miles of open ocean. You've come to know these men well in the weeks since leaving the Canary Islands behind. Pedro Gutierrez, the royal steward appointed to maintain the expedition's official records, carries himself with the careful dignity of a man accustomed to royal courts and formal ceremonies. His clothing, even after weeks at sea, maintains the neat appearance that speaks of someone who understands that his role represents the authority of the Spanish crown. When he passes carrying his writing materials and official documents, he nods with the courteous respect that has made him popular among the crew despite his official position. His writing materials, quill pens, cut from the finest goose feathers, ink made from oak gall and iron that will remain legible for centuries, parchment prepared by craftsmen who learned their skills in monastery, scriptoriums represent civilization itself, carried into the wilderness of the sea. The scratching of his pen as he records the day's observations provides a comforting counterpoint to the natural sounds of wind and wave. A reminder that human knowledge and human institutions continue to function even in the midst of the vast unknown. Rodrigo de Escobedo. The expedition's secretary works nearby with the methodical care of a man who understands that his records will be scrutinized by scholars and officials who were not present to witness these historic events. His charts, updated daily with Columbus's latest calculations and observations, represent humanity's growing understanding of the world's true shape and extent. Each mark he makes on the parchment adds to the sum of human knowledge, contributing to maps that will guide future navigators across waters that are currently blank spaces marked only with the words "Here be monsters" or "Unknown sea." The careful precision of his work, the steady hand that marks latitude and longitude, the methodical notation of wind direction and sailing speed, the detailed descriptions of weather conditions and sea state creates a record that transforms this voyage from mere adventure into scientific expedition. His quill pen scratches softly against the parchment in a rhythm that mingles with the creaking of ropes and the distant cry of seabirds, creating a symphony of human activity set against the eternal music of wind and wave. The seabirds themselves provide a connection to the world of living things that continues to exist beyond the ship's wooden walls. Petrels wheel and dive around the vessel, their cries carrying news from parts of the ocean that human eyes have never seen. Their effortless flight, their ability to sleep on the wing during long migrations, their instinctive knowledge of weather patterns and feeding grounds represent a kind of wisdom that human navigators study but can never fully master. Watching these birds, you're reminded that the sea is not empty space between destinations, but a complete world unto itself, filled with creatures that have adapted to its rhythms and challenges in ways that might teach lessons to the humans who venture across its surface. The bird's presence provides reassurance that life persists even in the most seemingly barren environments, that the ocean supports complex communities of creatures whose existence suggests that the waters ahead may hold more wonders than any human imagination has yet conceived. The ship's cook, Alfonso Herrera, emerges from the galley with the theatrical announcement that has become as much a part of the ship's routine as the changing of the watch. Alfonso is a stout man whose generous belly speaks to his skill at making even the most basic ingredients into something resembling proper meals, and whose perpetually cheerful disposition suggests either remarkable optimism or a complete inability to comprehend the magnitude of the challenge he faces in feeding 30 men on an ocean voyage of unknown duration. "Come, my hungry sailors." He calls his voice carrying the warm invitation that transforms mealtime from mere necessity into social occasion. Today we feast like kings' kings who happen to be crossing an ocean on a wooden ship with limited provisions, but kings nonetheless. His humor has become one of the ship's most valuable resources, as essential as favorable winds or accurate navigation for maintaining the morale that keeps men functioning when the familiar world has disappeared beyond every horizon. Alfonso understands instinctively that laughter serves the same function at sea that hope serves on land. It provides reason to continue when logic suggests that continuing might be futile. You make your way below deck, descending into the cramped but surprisingly cozy world that exists between the Santa Maria's waterline and her main deck. The transition from the bright openness of the deck to the intimate dimness of the ship's interior always requires a moment for your eyes to adjust, but the change brings with it a sense of shelter and community that balances the expansive freedom of the ocean's surface. The below-deck space represents one of humanity's most ingenious adaptations to the challenge of long-distance sea travel, a complete living environment compressed into the smallest possible area, while still providing for all the basic needs of human life. Every cubic inch has been considered and allocated, every surface designed to serve multiple purposes, every fixture positioned to remain functional, regardless of how the ship might roll or pitch in heavy seas. Ship's lanterns, their flames protected by horn panels that filter the light into a warm golden glow, hang from hooks designed to keep them stable even when the vessel rolls through 45-degree angles. The light they cast creates pools of illumination that transform the cramped quarters into something resembling a tavern common room, intimate and welcoming despite the unusual setting. The smell of the below-deck area tells its own story, layers of aroma that speak to the realities of life in a confined space shared by 30 men for weeks at a time. The dominant scent is wood oak, seasoned with salt air and treated with pitch until it has become something more than mere timber. Beneath this foundation lie other odors, the sharp tang of vinegar used to combat scurvy, the earthy smell of the sand used in the galley's firebox, the metallic aroma of iron pots and tools, and the complex bouquet that comes from men who work hard in close quarters with limited opportunities for bathing. But rather than being unpleasant, these combined scents create an atmosphere that speaks of human community persisting in the face of extraordinary challenges. The smell of shared meals, shared work, shared dangers overcome through collective effort. It's the olfactory signature of men who have learned to function as a single organism, despite coming from different towns, different backgrounds, different dreams of what this voyage might bring. The food that Alfonso presents represents both the limitations and the ingenuity that characterize all aspects of ocean voyaging. The basic ingredients are necessarily simple hardtack biscuits baked till they're hard enough to survive months without spoiling, dried peas that have been stored in sealed containers to protect them from moisture, and rats, salted pork that has been preserved in brine, strong enough to prevent decay even in tropical heat. But Alfonso's skill lies in his ability to transform these basic materials into something that not only nourishes the body but also feeds the spirit. The hardtack, which would be nearly inedible if simply gnawed in its original form, has been soaked in watered wine until it softens into something approaching bread. The dried peas have been cooked slowly in seawater and ship's water until they form a thick, satisfying porridge that carries the flavors of whatever herbs Alfonso has managed to preserve from the ship's limited stores of seasonings. The salted pork, carefully divided so that every man receives his fair portion, has been prepared in a way that maximizes both its nutritional value and its psychological impact. Rather than simply distributing chunks of preserved meat, Alfonso has created a stew that stretches the pork with vegetables preserved in vinegar, creating a dish that resembles the comfort foods that every sailor remembers from his life on shore. As you settle onto a wooden crate with your bowl, balanced carefully on your knees, you become part of a scene that has been repeated countless times throughout maritime history. Men sharing simple food in cramped quarters, creating community and comfort through the simple act of eating together. The wooden bowl in your hands bears the wear patterns of many previous meals, its surface smoothed by years of use until it fits your grip with the familiarity of a tool that has been shaped specifically for its purpose. The conversations that flow around you in the dim, warm light of the ship's lanterns create a tapestry of human experience that transforms this confined space into something larger than its physical dimensions. These talks are not about the grand purposes of the voyage or the potential wealth that might await in the Indies, but about the small personal details that make up the fabric of individual lives. "My wife makes bread that's soft as clouds," says one sailor, his voice carrying the warmth of memory. "She shapes each loaf with her hands, and when it comes from the oven, the whole house smells like heaven itself." Another man chuckles softly. "My daughter is learning to sew. When I left, she was working on a sampler with letters stitched in blue thread. I wonder if she's finished it by now, if she's moved on to more difficult work." These quiet conversations, shared over simple meals in the gentle rocking of the ship, create a sense of fellowship that makes the vast ocean feel smaller, more manageable. You're not alone out here, you're part of something larger, a community of men who have chosen to face the unknown together. Time becomes fluid in the middle of the Atlantic, measured not in the familiar divisions of hours and days that govern life on shore, but in the eternal rhythms that have ruled the sea since the beginning of the world. Weeks flow into each other like waves merging into the endless procession of swells that lift and lower the Santa Maria in her steady progress toward the unknown west. The sun rises from the vast water ahead, travels its ancient arc across the infinite dome of sky, and sets into the vast water behind, painting the waves each evening in colors so magnificent that they seem like personal gifts from heaven to the small company of men who witness them in solitude. You are no longer counting individual days. Such precise measurements feel artificial out here, where the only meaningful divisions are the natural cycles that govern all life at sea. Time is measured in watches, in the rotation of men through their duties, in the slow consumption of provisions that marks your distance not just from home, but from the familiar world where human schedules matter more than celestial movements. The rhythm of shipboard life has become as natural as breathing, as unconscious as the beating of your heart. You wake not to the sound of church bells or roosters crowing, but to the gentle touch of the sailor whose watch replaces yours, to the subtle changes in the ship's motion that indicate shifts in wind or weather, to the internal clock that every experienced seaman develops through years of adapting to the sea's requirements rather than society's conventions. Your meals are no longer events that occur at predetermined hours, but responses to hunger and the availability of ingredients that must be carefully rationed to last through a voyage of unknown duration. The bread, as you had predicted with bitter humor, in those early days when the voyage still seemed like an adventure rather than an endurance test, has indeed become as hard as stone, harder in fact than many of the rocks you remember from the hillsides around your hometown. Each biscuit now requires careful preparation before it becomes edible. You've learned to soak it thoroughly in whatever liquid is available, a process that requires patience and planning, since the hardtack absorbs moisture slowly and reluctantly. When there's wine to spare, increasingly rare as the weeks pass, the soaking process creates something that approximates actual bread, with flavors that remind you of the bakeries near the harbor where you spent your childhood. When wine must be conserved for more essential purposes, you soak the hardtack in water, though the result lacks the complex flavors that make the meal pleasant rather than merely nutritious. Sometimes during the longer stretches, when every drop of liquid must be carefully allocated, you find yourself holding a piece of hardtack in your mouth for long minutes, allowing your saliva to slowly soften it enough to chew, a process that requires both patience and a sense of humor about the circumstances that have reduced grown men to such primitive eating methods. The fresh water stored in great wooden barrels secured in the ship's hold tells its own story of the voyage's duration through the gradual changes in its taste and character. What began as clean, sweet water drawn from wells in the Canary Islands has developed the distinctive flavor profile of a long ocean voyage, woody from the barrel staves, tinged with the taste of the pitch used to seal the containers against leakage, and carrying increasingly complex notes that you prefer not to examine too closely. The water's temperature has settled into a lukewarm consistency that reflects the ship's internal climate, neither refreshingly cool nor pleasantly warm, but simply adequate for sustaining life. You've learned to drink it quickly without dwelling on its taste, focusing instead on the essential function it serves in keeping your body functioning in the salt air environment that dehydrates sailors more quickly than landlubbers realize. Yet even with these challenges, there are moments of transcendent beauty that remind you why men have been drawn to the sea since the beginning of human history. Standing at the rail during your afternoon watch, you gaze out at the endless blue expanse and experience something approaching religious awe at the sheer magnitude of the ocean's presence. The water stretches away in all directions until it meets the sky at a horizon so distant that it seems like the edge of creation itself. The color of the sea changes constantly, sometimes deep blue-black that suggests infinite depths, sometimes brilliant turquoise that sparkles like liquid jewels in the sunlight, sometimes gray-green that mirrors the changing moods of the sky above. Each variation in color tells you something about the water's depth, the angle of the sun, the approaching weather, the invisible currents that flow beneath the surface like rivers within the sea. The surface itself presents an ever-changing display of texture and pattern. Long swells roll beneath the ship with the rhythm of deep breathing, the legacy of storms that occurred hundreds of miles away and sent their energy racing across the ocean in waves that will travel until they finally break against some distant shore. Smaller waves generated by the immediate wind create patterns of white foam that appear and disappear like thoughts, forming and dissolving in some vast marine consciousness. It's during one of these contemplative moments, with the afternoon sun warming your face and the salt breeze carrying away the accumulated stress of weeks at sea, that the familiar sailor's thought enters your mind with such force that you speak it aloud to the endless water. If I don't see land soon, I might just jump into this sea and have a conversation with the fish. The words carry a mixture of frustration and humor that perfectly captures the sailor's relationship with the ocean. Respect mixed with exasperation, or tempered by practical concerns. Love complicated by the very real possibility that this beautiful, terrible environment might ultimately prove fatal to anyone foolish enough to challenge its power. The thought of actually implementing your threat brings a smile to your weathered face. You imagine yourself sinking slowly through the clear blue water, your body adapting to the pressure, and the cold settling gently on the sandy bottom, where curious fish gather to examine this unusual visitor to their realm. "Excuse me, friend fish," you imagine yourself saying to a particularly intelligent-looking grouper who approaches with the cautious curiosity that fish show toward unfamiliar objects. "I don't suppose you happen to know the way to the Indies? My captain seems to have misplaced them somewhere in all this water." The fish, being a sensible creature with extensive experience of the ocean's mysteries, would probably respond by blowing a stream of bubbles and swimming away with the kind of dismissive gesture that fish reserve for questions too foolish to deserve proper answers. This would leave you sitting on the ocean floor, no wiser than before, but possibly more aware of the absurdity inherent in expecting simple answers to questions about navigation in unknown waters. The fantasy becomes so vivid that you can almost feel the cold water closing over your head, the strange silence of the underwater world replacing the familiar sounds of wind and rigging, the peculiar freedom that would come from abandoning the complex challenges of navigation and simply accepting whatever the sea might choose to provide. But the sound of activity behind you draws your attention back to the deck of the Santa Maria, where your fellow sailors continue their eternal round of duties that keep the ship functioning and moving steadward toward whatever destiny awaits beyond the horizon. The fantasy of underwater conversation with fish, amusing as it might be, remains firmly in the realm of imagination, while the very real challenges of ocean voyaging demand your continued attention and participation. A gentle splash draws your attention to the water beside the ship, interrupting your contemplative conversation with imaginary sea creatures and returning your focus to the very real wonders that the ocean provides for those patient enough to observe them. A school of dolphins has appeared with the magical suddenness that characterizes all the sea's gifts, their sleek grey bodies cutting through the waves with an effortless grace that makes human attempts at water travel seem clumsy and mechanical by comparison. These are not the first dolphins you've encountered during your years at sea, but familiarity does nothing to diminish the sense of wonder that their presence brings. Each dolphin moves with perfect adaptation to its environment, every movement flowing seamlessly from one into the next, their swimming as natural and unconscious as a bird's flight or a fish's breathing. They leap and play in the ship's wake with a joy that seems to transcend mere survival, transforming the simple act of travel into something approaching art. You lean over the rail to watch them more closely, your weathered hands gripping the smooth wood as you study the intricate patterns of their movement. The dolphins seem to delight in the challenge of matching the ship's speed, racing alongside the Santa Maria with casual ease before launching themselves into spectacular leaps that carry them high above the surface, their bodies spinning and twisting with an athletic grace that speaks to millions of years of evolution perfecting the art of marine locomotion. Their presence transforms the empty seascape into something alive and welcoming. Where moments before there was only the endless monotony of blue water stretching away toward distant horizons, now there's a display of natural virtuosity that rivals any entertainment provided by human performers. The dolphins communicate with each other through a series of clicks and whistles that carry clearly across the water, their language obviously complex and purposeful, even though its meaning remains mysterious to human observers. "Beautiful creatures," says a familiar voice beside you, and you turn to see Columbus himself, his eyes fixed on the dolphins with an expression that transforms his weathered features from their usual intensity into something approaching childlike wonder. For this moment, the worry lines around his eyes smooth away the constant tension that comes from bearing responsibility for 30 men on an impossible voyage relaxes, and he looks younger, more like the dreamer who first conceived this audacious plan than the captain who must somehow transform dreams into reality. The change in his demeanor is remarkable. Columbus, the navigator. Columbus, the explorer. Columbus, the man driven by visions of wealth and glory. All of these roles temporarily set aside in favor of something more fundamental. Columbus, the human being capable of being moved by simple beauty, still able to find wonder in the natural world despite the enormous pressures that have been weighing on his shoulders for months. They seem to be enjoying themselves, Captain. You observe your voice carrying the respect that has grown during these weeks of shared challenges, but also the easy familiarity that develops between men who have faced uncertainty together. Perhaps they know something about these waters that we don't. Your words touch on one of the eternal questions that plague sailors in unknown waters, the relationship between human knowledge and the instinctive wisdom that seems to guide the creatures that have made the ocean their permanent home. Do these dolphins understand currents and weather patterns that human navigation has yet to discover? Do their migrations follow routes that could guide ships towards safe harbors? Are their playful appearances random encounters? Or do they represent some form of communication that human minds have not yet learned to interpret? Columbus nods his gaze, still following the dolphin's graceful arcs through the blue water, his expression thoughtful as he considers the implications of your observation. His silence stretches long enough to suggest that he's wrestling with questions that go beyond simple navigation, touching on the deeper mysteries of how different forms of intelligence might relate to each other in the vast community of life that the ocean represents. In the ancient writings, he says finally, his voice carrying the scholarly tone that emerges whenever he draws upon the extensive reading that has shaped his understanding of the world, dolphins were said to guide sailors to safe harbors. The Greeks believed they were messengers of Poseidon, showing the way to those who were lost, leading ships away from dangerous reefs and toward friendly ports. The reference to classical learning brings with it the weight of centuries of human attempts to understand the sea and humanity's place within its vast dominion. The Greeks, those master navigators who first mapped the Mediterranean and ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic, accumulated knowledge through generations of careful observation and recorded their insights in texts that continue to influence navigation centuries later. Columbus has studied these ancient sources with the dedication of a scholar searching for clues that might guide his own unprecedented voyage into waters that no European has ever sailed. His charts are filled with notations drawn from classical texts, medieval travel accounts, and the accumulated wisdom of Arab navigators who extended their knowledge farther across the unknown ocean than any Christian explorers had previously dared. But now, watching the dolphins play in the ship's wake with obvious delight, the relationship between ancient wisdom and immediate experience takes on new dimensions. These are not abstract concepts from dusty manuscripts, but living creatures whose behavior might indeed provide guidance for navigation in waters where human knowledge offers no certain answers. You watch as one particularly exuberant dolphin launches itself high into the air, its body spinning in a complete rotation before splashing back into the waves with a joyful enthusiasm that seems to celebrate the simple pleasure of being alive in this vast marine environment. The sight brings a spontaneous smile to your face and seems to lighten something in your chest that has been tight with worry for weeks. Then perhaps we're not as lost as we sometimes feel. Captain, you say your words carrying both hope and the kind of practical optimism that has sustained sailors through countless voyages into the unknown. Columbus turns to look at you then, and in his eyes you see not just the fierce determination that has become familiar over these months, but something deeper and more vulnerable, the weight of leading so many men into complete uncertainty, the burden of maintaining confidence when every rational calculation suggests that you're all sailing toward either glory or disaster with no middle ground possible. The Dolphin Show continues for nearly an hour, providing entertainment and wonder that transforms the afternoon watch from routine maintenance into something approaching celebration. The entire crew eventually gathers at the rails to watch their voices mixing laughter and amazement as they point out particularly spectacular leaps or comment on the obvious intelligence displayed in the dolphin's coordinated movements. He turns to look at you then, and you see something in his eyes, not just the fierce determination you've grown accustomed to, but a deeper vulnerability, the weight of leading so many men into the complete unknown. Do you doubt our course, Santos? It's a question that deserves an honest answer. You consider the hardtack in your pocket, the dwindling water supplies, the way some of the crew whisper when they think the officers aren't listening. I doubt many things, Captain, you say slowly. But I don't doubt your conviction, and sometimes conviction is enough to carry a ship farther than certainty ever could. As the afternoon light begins to shift toward evening, painting the endless water in softer shades of blue and gold, you remain at the rail, feeling the salt breeze carry away your worries. The dolphins continue their joyful dance beside the ship, and you find yourself thinking that perhaps they do know something, after all, that the journey itself can be as important as the destination, that wonder can be found even in the vast emptiness of the open sea. The sun settles lower on the horizon, and you head below to help prepare the evening meal. Tonight, like every night for weeks now, you'll eat your portion of hardtack and salted meat. You'll listen to your shipmates' stories and dreams, and you'll fall asleep to the gentle rocking of the Santa Maria as she carries you steadily westward toward whatever waits beyond the edge of the known world. The mood aboard the Santa Maria shifts like weather at sea, gradually at first, then with gathering intensity. You notice it in small things, the way conversations quiet when Columbus approaches, the sidelong glances exchanged during the changing of the watch, the increasing frequency of sailors gathering in small groups to speak in voices too low to carry. It's been over 2 months since you left the Canary Islands behind, and the vast ocean has shown you nothing but its own endless face. No birds except the occasional storm petrel, no floating weeds to suggest nearby land, no clouds on the horizon that might indicate islands just beyond sight. Just water stretching away in all directions until it meets the sky. You're coiling rope near the mainmast when the first open complaint breaks the morning quiet. Rodrigo Bermejo, a sailor from Moguer with arms like tree trunks and a voice to match, stops his work and straightens his face red with frustration. "Enough!" he shouts loud enough that every man on deck turns to look. "We've been sailing toward nothing for months. The food grows shorter, the water tastes of rot, and still we sail west into emptiness." Columbus, who had been consulting his charts near the helm, looks up sharply. You can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his knuckles whiten as his grip tightens on the parchment. He approaches Bermejo with measured steps, his captain's authority radiating from every movement. "What would you have me do, Bermejo?" Columbus asks, his voice carrying clearly across the deck. "Turn back when we may be mere days from our destination." Bermejo gestures wildly toward the endless horizon. Destination. We don't even know if there is a destination. For all we know, we're sailing toward the edge of the world itself. Other sailors begin to gather their faces, showing the strain of long weeks at sea. You see doubt in their eyes, and something more dangerous, the kind of desperation that can turn a crew against their captain. Your hand instinctively moves to the rope at your belt, not from any thought of violence, but from the sailor's instinct to secure anything that might come loose in a storm. "We will die out here," shouts another voice from the crowd. It's Cristobal Garcia Sarmiento, the youngest of the able seamen, barely older than yourself. His voice cracks with emotion. "My mother doesn't even know where I am. She thinks I'm trading in Mediterranean ports, not sailing off the edge of creation." Columbus stands tall in the center of the growing circle of agitated sailors. Despite the complaints and fears pressing in around him, his voice remains steady, confident. He points toward the western horizon with the same unwavering gesture you've seen him make 100 times before. India is right there. He declares, his voice carrying the absolute conviction that has sustained this voyage from the beginning. Beyond that horizon lie the golden cities of Cathay, the spice ports of the Indies, wealth beyond imagining. We are closer now than any Christian men have ever been to the lands of the great Khan. You find yourself caught between admiration and concern. Columbus speaks with such certainty that you almost believe he can see through the curve of the earth itself to the lands he promises. But you've also learned to read the sea and sky, and you see no signs of the approach to any lands, whether they be the Indies or anywhere else. A quiet voice speaks up from your left. It's Juan de la Cosa, his weathered face thoughtful as he addresses both the captain and the restless crew. Captain Columbus speaks of wealth and wonders, he says, diplomatically, but the men speak of practical concerns. Our supplies grow short, and we are farther from home than any Spanish ship has ever sailed. Columbus turns to face his ship's master, and you see a flicker of something, not doubt, but perhaps the first acknowledgement that the situation requires more than just unwavering conviction. Juan speaks wisely, Columbus concedes. But consider this, we have favorable winds at our backs. We make good time each day. If the Indies are indeed where my calculations place them, we should sight land within the week. And if they're not, asks Bermejo, his voice still carrying the edge of challenge, but tempered now by Juan's more diplomatic tone. You watch this exchange with the fascination of a young man witnessing history unfold, though you don't yet realize that's exactly what you're seeing. The tension on deck is palpable. You can feel it in the way the other sailors shift their weight, in the careful attention they pay to every word spoken between their captain and the challengers. Columbus is quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from face to face among the gathered crew. When he speaks again, his voice is lower, more personal. "If we do not sight land within 10 days, we will discuss altering our course. It's a compromise, and everyone recognizes it as such. Not quite the commitment to turn back that some of the sailors want, but an acknowledgement that their concerns are not without merit." The tension begins to ease like a sail losing wind. As the crowd disperses and the sailors return to their duties, you remain near the mainmast, thinking about what you've just witnessed. You pull a piece of hardtack from your pocket and examine it critically. The biscuit is indeed hard as stone, requiring careful soaking before it becomes edible. You dip it into your cup of watered wine and take a contemplative bite. If India is really right there, you mutter to yourself with a slight smile, "It must be getting tired of waiting for us to arrive." The thought amuses you enough that some of the morning's tension lifts from your shoulders. You've learned that humor, like hope, is one of the essential supplies for any long voyage, and unlike food and water, it's something that grows stronger when shared rather than consumed. As the afternoon progresses, you notice that Columbus spends more time at the bow of the ship, his eyes fixed on the western horizon with an intensity that suggests he's trying to will land into existence through sheer determination. Whether his confidence is justified or not, you find yourself hoping that it is. Not just for the promise of wealth or the successful completion of your mission, but because you've come to admire the kind of courage it takes to sail confidently toward the unknown. The night of October 11th unfolds with a peculiar intensity that seems to charge the very air around the Santa Maria with anticipation. You're not sure whether this feeling comes from some sixth sense that experienced sailors develop after years of reading the sea's subtle signals, or whether it's simply the psychological pressure of knowing that Columbus's promised deadline approaches the 10 days he gave the crew before considering a change of course. The watch passes slowly each hour, marked not by the mechanical divisions of ship's time, but by the gradual rotation of stars across the vast dome of night sky. You stand near the bow with Rodrigo de Triana, your bodies automatically adjusting to the ship's gentle motion as she continues her westward course through waters that have never felt the touch of European keels. The moon, nearly full and riding high above the endless ocean, casts a path of silver light across the water that seems to stretch from the ship's bow toward the western horizon like a bridge leading toward unknown destinations. The moonlight transforms the nighttime sea from a dark void into something magical, a surface that reflects the celestial light while hiding infinite depths beneath its illuminated skin. This is your favorite time during the night watch, when the moon is bright enough to see by, but the sun's absence allows the stars to display their full glory. The constellations wheel overhead in patterns that have guided navigators since the beginning of human seafaring, the North Star, holding its steady position, the Great Bear rotating around it in its eternal circuit, Orion striding across the southern sky with his belt of 3 bright stars that have served as landmarks for countless voyages. But tonight, there seems to be something different about the familiar ritual of celestial observation. The air carries scents that tease the edge of perception, not just the endless salt tang of the deep ocean, but something warmer, more complex, that makes you lift your nose and breathe deeply in an attempt to identify the source. "Do you smell that?" Rodrigo asks quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of water rushing past the hull and the gentle creaking of rigging above your heads. His question confirms that your senses aren't playing tricks, that there really is something different about tonight's atmosphere. You lift your face toward the western breeze and inhale slowly, letting the night air flow through your nostrils while your mind attempts to analyze the complex bouquet that mingles with the familiar ocean scents. Yes, there is definitely something different. Not just the endless salt of deep water, but undertones that suggest the presence of land, of growing things of soil and vegetation, and the complex aromatic signature that comes from large masses of earth, warming under tropical sun and cooling under star-filled skies. The scent is faint, so subtle that it might be imagination rather than reality, but it carries with it the promise of something that every sailor on a long voyage dreams of: the approach to land, the end of the endless blue monotony, the return to a world where human feet can touch solid ground and human eyes can see horizons defined by hills and forests, rather than the featureless curve where water meets sky. Could be land, you whisper back, not wanting to raise false hopes, but unable to keep the excitement entirely out of your voice. Your heart begins to beat a little faster as you consider the implications. If this mysterious scent indeed indicates the approach to land, then Columbus's calculations may prove accurate. His confidence justified his impossible dream about to transform into tangible reality. Or it could be wishful thinking. You add the experienced sailor's caution tempering your initial enthusiasm. You've been at sea long enough to know that the mind can play elaborate tricks when it's desperate for change, when the sameness of ocean voyaging has continued long enough that consciousness begins to manufacture variations that exist more in hope than in sensory reality. Rodrigo nods, understanding the balance between optimism and skepticism that every sailor must maintain during long voyages. His eyes remain fixed on the western horizon, searching the darkness for any sign that might confirm what your noses seem to be detecting. The horizon at night is a subtle thing, visible more as the absence of stars than as a definite line, marked by the gradual transition from the star-filled sky to the darker area where the Earth would be if Earth were indeed ahead of you. The hours pass with agonizing slowness as both of you maintain your vigil, scanning the darkness for any visual confirmation of what your other senses seem to be suggesting. The ship continues her steady progress, her motion unchanged but somehow carrying new significance now that the possibility of approaching land has entered your consciousness. Other members of the night watch begin to notice the subtle change in atmosphere. Men pause in their duties to lift their faces toward the western breeze testing the air with the instinctive awareness that develops in anyone who spends significant time in natural environments. Quiet conversations begin to spring up across the deck as sailors share their observations and speculations about what the night might bring. Columbus appears on deck well before dawn, as has become his habit during these tense, final days of the voyage. His presence adds weight to the growing sense of anticipation that has been building through the night watch. He positions himself at the highest accessible point on the ship, his body tense with the focused attention of a man whose entire reputation, whose very life, depends on what the next few hours might reveal. The captain's appearance signals to the entire crew that this night is different, that the routine of ocean voyaging has given way to something more significant. Men who should be sleeping in their off-watch hours find reasons to come on deck, drawn by the collective sense that history might be about to unfold before their eyes. As the eastern sky begins to show the first pale hints of approaching dawn, the change in the air becomes more pronounced. The scent that you and Rodrigo first detected hours ago has strengthened, becoming less ambiguous, more clearly identifiable as the complex aromatic signature of land, earth, and vegetation flowers, and growing things, the distinctive smell of places where fresh water meets salt, where rivers carry the essence of interior forests out to merge with the endless ocean. The sea itself seems different as the light grows stronger. The color, which has been the deep blue-black of profound depths for so many weeks, shows hints of change, subtle variations that suggest shallowing water, different bottom compositions, the influence of land-based currents and runoff that modify the chemistry and appearance of seawater near substantial landmasses. Birds begin to appear, not just the storm petrels and other pelagic species that can be found hundreds of miles from the nearest shore, but land-based birds whose presence indicates proximity to substantial territories where they nest and feed. These birds circle the ship with behavior patterns different from the purely oceanic species you've grown accustomed to, more directed, more purposeful, as if they're commuting between the ship and destinations that lie beyond the horizon. The tension on deck becomes almost palpable as dawn approaches. Every man stands at his post with unusual alertness, scanning the western horizon with an intensity that speaks to the magnitude of what they hope to see. Conversations drop to whispers, as if speaking too loudly might somehow interfere with the process of discovery that everyone senses is about to unfold. And then, just as the first pale light of dawn begins to touch the eastern edges of the sky, painting the clouds in delicate shades of pink and gold that herald the approach of sunrise, Rodrigo de Triana's voice cuts through the morning air with the power and clarity of a church bell, announcing the most important moment in the history of human navigation. Land, land. He shouts, his voice carrying across the ship and beyond toward the endless ocean that suddenly no longer seems endless. I see land ahead. For a moment, the entire ship seems to hold its breath. Then chaos erupts. Sailors come pouring up from below deck, still buttoning their shirts and pulling on their caps, their faces showing the wild hope of men who have been at sea for over 2 months without sight of shore. Where? Voices call out from every direction. Men crowd toward the bow, pushing and jostling to get a clear view of the western horizon. You find yourself pressed against the rail, your heart pounding, as your eyes strain to make out what Rodrigo has seen. There, a dark line against the pale morning sky, so faint that it might be clouds, but too steady, too solid. As the light grows stronger, the line becomes more distinct, revealing the unmistakable silhouette of land trees, beaches, the gentle rise of hills beyond the shore. We have reached India. Columbus shouts, his voice carrying triumph and vindication to every corner of the ship. He raises his arms toward the sky, as if in thanks to divine providence. Behold the lands of the great Khan. We have achieved what no Christian expedition has ever achieved. The crew erupts in celebration. Men dance on the deck, embracing each other with tears of joy streaming down their weathered faces. Someone breaks out a small cask of wine that had been saved for special occasions, and cups are filled and passed from hand to hand. The sound of laughter and relieved voices fills the morning air, mixing with the crying of seabirds that have appeared, as if from nowhere, to welcome your approach to land. You find yourself caught up in the celebration, accepting embraces from sailors you've worked beside for months, sharing in the overwhelming relief and joy of finally seeing the end of your ocean voyage. But even as you join in the cheering, a small part of your mind looks at the green shoreline ahead, at the coconut palms swaying in the morning breeze, at the white sand beaches that seem to stretch for miles in both directions, and thinks, this India looks a bit like a resort beach. The thought makes you smile even more broadly. After months of hardtack and salted meat, after weeks of drinking water that tastes of wood and pitch, after endless days of nothing but blue water and blue sky, you're not inclined to complain about what kind of land you've found. Paradise is paradise, whether it's the Indies or somewhere else entirely. Columbus orders the ships to approach the shore, carefully testing the depth as you go and watching for reefs or hidden obstacles. As the Santa Maria draws closer to land, you can make out individual trees, see the white sand beaches more clearly, notice the way the morning sunlight turns the shallow water near shore into a brilliant turquoise that seems almost too beautiful to be real. Birds unlike any you've seen before circle overhead, bright tropical species with vivid plumage that catches the sunlight like living jewels. The air grows warmer and more fragrant with each passing hour, carrying scents of flowers and growing things that make your sun-weathered face relax into an unconscious smile. By mid-morning, Columbus has selected a suitable spot for landing, a protected cove with calm water and a gently sloping beach that will make it easy to bring the ship's boats ashore. As preparations begin for the historic landing, you take a moment to stand at the rail and simply absorb the sight before you. The shoreline is more beautiful than anything you could have imagined during those long weeks at sea. Tall palm trees lean over crystal clear water, their fronds rustling in the gentle breeze. The beach is pristine white sand unmarked by human footprints. Beyond the beach, green hills rise toward the interior of what appears to be a substantial island. And there, emerging from the tree line with the cautious curiosity of people encountering something completely unprecedented, are the inhabitants of this remarkable place. They move with the easy grace of people completely at home in their environment. Their skin bronzed by the tropical sun, their clothing simple and practical for the warm climate. As you prepare to lower the ship's boats for the landing party, you feel a sense of awe settling over you like a comfortable cloak. Whatever this place is, whether it's the Indies, as Columbus believes, or somewhere else entirely, you are about to become one of the first Europeans to set foot on its shores, to meet its people, to begin a chapter of history that will change the world forever. The morning sun climbs higher, painting everything in shades of gold and green, and you help lower the boats that will carry you toward one of the most momentous encounters in human history. The boat crunches gently against the sandy shore, and you feel solid ground beneath the bow for the first time in over 2 months. The sensation is almost dizzying after so long, adapting to the constant motion of the ship. The stillness of land feels strange, almost unreal. Columbus steps ashore first, as befits the expedition's leader, carrying the royal banner of Spain. He plants it firmly in the sand and formally claims this territory for their Catholic Majesties, Ferdinand and Isabella. His voice carries clearly across the beach as he makes the legal declaration, but your attention is drawn to the group of people emerging from the tropical forest at the edge of the beach. They approach without fear, their movements graceful and confident. These are clearly people completely at home in their environment, their skin kissed by the sun to a warm bronze, their hair dark and straight, their clothing simple but well crafted for the warm, humid climate. Some wear cotton garments dyed in soft earth tones, while others are adorned with intricate accessories made from shells, feathers, and polished stones that catch the morning light. What strikes you most immediately is their expression of welcome. Far from showing alarm at the arrival of strange ships and oddly dressed foreigners, they smile with genuine warmth. Their eyes show curiosity rather than fear, and they gesture in a manner that clearly indicates hospitality. "The Indians are so kind," Columbus observes solemnly, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man whose theories are being confirmed by direct observation. He has convinced himself completely that these people are inhabitants of the Indies, and their friendly demeanor seems to support his expectations of Eastern hospitality. One of the islanders, a man perhaps 40 years old with graying hair, and the bearing of someone accustomed to respect, approaches your landing party. He speaks in a melodious language that none of you understand, but his tone is unmistakably welcoming. He gestures toward the interior of the island, clearly inviting you to follow him. As your group begins to walk inland following a well-maintained path that leads through groves of fruit trees, the islanders fall into step beside you with easy familiarity. Children appear from among the trees, their eyes bright with curiosity as they examine your strange clothing, your pale skin, the metal tools hanging from your belts. You find yourself walking beside a young woman about your own age whose smile needs no translation. She points to various plants and trees as you pass, speaking their names in her own language, then listening carefully as you attempt to repeat the words. Your pronunciation makes her laugh, a sound like water over smooth stones, but it's laughter without mockery, the kind that invites you to join in rather than feel embarrassed. The path leads through gardens that seem to blend seamlessly with the natural forest. You see plants, you recognize beans, climbing up tall poles, gourds growing on trailing vines, mixed with others that are completely unfamiliar. The air is filled with the scent of flowers and ripe fruit, a dramatic contrast to the salt and tar aromas that have filled your world for so many weeks. As you walk, you become aware of the sounds surrounding you, the gentle rustle of palm fronds in the breeze, the distant sound of waves on the shore, birds calling from the forest canopy, the soft voices of the islanders as they point out various features of their home to these unexpected visitors. The village, when you reach it, is unlike anything in your European experience. The houses are made from local materials, palm fronds, bamboo, and a kind of clay that has been shaped and dried to create walls that seem to breathe with the tropical air. Gardens surround each dwelling, filled with plants both practical and beautiful. Everything seems designed to work in harmony with the natural environment rather than to dominate or change it. The villagers gather around your group with the same welcoming curiosity their scouts showed on the beach. An elderly woman approaches with a large basket from which she begins distributing food to the visitors. You accept what appears to be a piece of bread made from some unfamiliar grain, along with fruits that are unlike anything you've ever tasted. The bread has a sweet, nutty flavor that makes your mouth water after months of hardtack. One of the fruits is golden and juicy with a taste that seems to combine the best qualities of several European fruits while remaining completely unique. Another is green on the outside but reveals bright orange flesh that has a creamy texture and a flavor unlike anything in your experience. "Maize," says the young woman walking beside you, pointing to the bread and speaking the word slowly so you can learn it. "Maize." You attempt to repeat it, "maize." She smiles and nods encouragingly, then corrects your pronunciation gently. "Maize, maize." You say again, and this time her smile broadens with approval. She points to one of the orange fruits, batata. "Batata," you repeat, finding this word easier to manage. As this informal language lesson continues, you become aware of the other members of your landing party having similar exchanges throughout the village. Columbus speaks with the elderly leader through gestures and the few words they're managing to share, while the other sailors explore this remarkable place with expressions of wonder. It's during this peaceful cultural exchange that a thought occurs to you, something so amusing that you have to suppress a chuckle. Looking around at this tropical paradise with its palm trees and warm beaches, its friendly inhabitants, and delicious food, you think to yourself, "It's strange for Indians to have no curry." The thought strikes you as wonderfully absurd. Here you are in what Columbus insists are the Indies, surrounded by people he's convinced are Indians, and yet nothing about this place matches the stories you've heard about the spice-rich lands of the East. No sign of the black pepper that's worth its weight in silver. In European markets, no cinnamon or nutmeg. No evidence of the vast trading networks that were supposed to characterize the wealthy kingdoms of the Orient. But as you accept another piece of the delicious fruit bread from your new friend and watch the easy interaction between your shipmates and these remarkably hospitable people, you find that you don't particularly care whether this is India or somewhere else entirely. After months at sea, surrounded by beauty and kindness, fed with foods more delicious than anything in your ship's stores, you're inclined to count your blessings rather than question your geography. The afternoon passes in this gentle cultural exchange, with both groups sharing what they can of their respective worlds through gesture, laughter, and the universal language of hospitality. As the tropical sun begins to move toward the western horizon, painting the village in warm golden light, you feel a deep contentment settling over you like a comfortable blanket. Whatever this place is, whoever these people are, you are part of something extraordinary, a meeting of worlds that will echo through history, the beginning of connections that will change everything for everyone involved. The evening meal becomes an adventure in discovery that surpasses anything you experienced during your months at sea. The villagers, with the generous hospitality that seems to characterize everything about these people, have prepared a feast to welcome their unexpected visitors. They guide your landing party to a large open area in the center of the village, where woven mats have been spread on the ground, and low wooden tables hold an abundance of foods, most of which you've never seen before. The setting is magical in the soft light of the tropical evening. Torches made from some local wood burn with a pleasant aromatic smoke that keeps insects away while casting dancing shadows across the gathered faces. The air is warm and humid, filled with the sounds of night birds and the distant rhythm of waves on the shore. Your host, the young woman who has been teaching you words in her language, gestures for you to sit beside her on one of the woven mats. The weaving is intricate and beautiful, made from fibers you don't recognize, but which feel smooth and cool beneath your hands. "Look at all this," whispers Pedro Gutierrez, settling onto a mat nearby. His eyes are wide as he surveys the abundance before you. After months of hardtack and salted meat, the variety of fresh foods seems almost overwhelming. The villagers begin serving the meal, starting with items that seem familiar enough. There are beans which you recognize, though they're prepared with spices that create flavors you've never experienced. Root vegetables that might be turnips, or some similar crop, though when you taste them, they're sweeter and more tender than any European variety. Your language teacher, you've learned that her name is Ayana, though you're still struggling with the pronunciation, offers you something that looks like a small red jewel. "Arji," she says, holding it delicately between her fingers. You accept the small red fruit and examine it closely. It's beautiful, glossy, and bright as a ruby, no bigger than the end of your thumb. Around the circle, you notice that some of your shipmates are being offered similar treats. The villagers handle them with what seems like casual familiarity, popping them into their mouths and chewing with evident enjoyment. Rodrigo Bermejo, the sailor, who had been so vocal about turning back just days ago, accepts one of the red fruits with enthusiasm. After months of ship food, he declares, "I'd eat anything that grows from actual soil." He bites down on the small red pepper with the confidence of a man who has never encountered anything spicier than the mild herbs used in Spanish cooking. The reaction is immediate and spectacular. Rodrigo's eyes go wide, then squeeze shut as his face turns an alarming shade of red. He leaps to his feet, dancing from one foot to the other, as if the ground beneath him has suddenly caught fire. Fire. He shouts, his voice higher than you've ever heard it. "There's fire in my mouth. Water. For the love of all saints, bring me water." The villagers, rather than showing alarm at this dramatic reaction, burst into delighted laughter. It's not cruel mockery, but the warm amusement of people who have clearly seen this exact reaction before. Several of them hurry to bring gourds filled with cool water, while others offer what appears to be a kind of sweet bread that they seem to know will help with the burning sensation. Ayana, still laughing softly, makes a gesture that clearly means small bite and offers you one of the fiery peppers. Having witnessed Rodrigo's dramatic reaction, you approach with considerably more caution. You nibble just the tiniest piece from the tip of the pepper. Even that small amount fills your mouth with heat, unlike anything you've ever experienced. It's not just hot, it's complex with layers of flavor that seem to build and change as the initial shock of the spice settles into something more manageable. Your eyes water, but you find that the sensation, while intense, is not entirely unpleasant. Pequeño, you say, using one of the Spanish words you've been teaching Ayana, making the same small gesture she had made. This delights her, and she nods approvingly. The other villagers seem pleased that you've shown both courage in trying their spicy food and wisdom in moderating your portion. As the evening progresses, more unusual dishes appear. There are stewed vegetables in combinations that never would have occurred to European cooks seasoned with herbs that create entirely new flavor experiences. Fruits, both familiar and exotic, are served alongside what appears to be a kind of fermented beverage that tastes mildly alcoholic and surprisingly refreshing. One dish particularly captures your attention, a thick stew made with ingredients you can't quite identify, but which tastes rich and satisfying in a way that makes your body remember how long it's been since you've eaten truly fresh food. When you ask what it is, Ayana points to various plants growing around the village, speaking their names in her language, then makes cooking gestures to show how they're prepared. The evening becomes a joyful cultural exchange with sailors and villagers, sharing foods, attempting to communicate recipes through gestures, and discovering that laughter truly is a universal language. Even Rodrigo, once he's recovered from his encounter with the pepper, joins in the merriment, though he approaches any red foods with considerably more respect. As you sit in this peaceful village surrounded by the warmth of new friendships and the satisfaction of the most delicious meal you've had in months, you reflect on the lessons of the evening. You've learned that never under any circumstances should you bite into an unknown red fruit without asking questions first. You've discovered that food can be a bridge between completely different worlds, and that the willingness to try something new carefully can lead to wonderful experiences. The torches burn lower as the evening progresses and the sounds of the tropical night grow louder around you. Somewhere in the darkness, night birds call to each other in voices unlike any European species. The air carries the scent of flowers that bloom only after dark, mixing with the lingering aromas of the evening's feast. Tomorrow, you know, there will be more discoveries, more exchanges, more opportunities to learn about this remarkable place and its people. But for now, sitting comfortably on woven mats under unfamiliar stars, your stomach full of foods that have expanded your understanding of what's possible in the world, you feel a deep contentment that has nothing to do with finding the Indies and everything to do with finding wonder in the unexpected. The morning sun filters through palm fronds as you wake to the sound of excited voices coming from the direction of the beach. After 3 days in the village, you've grown accustomed to the gentle rhythms of this place, the soft conversations of the villagers as they begin their daily work, children's laughter echoing from the gardens, the constant whisper of tropical breezes through the vegetation. But today's sounds are different. There's an urgency in Columbus's voice that carries clearly across the village, mixed with what sounds like the kind of enthusiasm that has been largely absent since the tensions of the long voyage. You rise from your sleeping mat, woven palm fronds that are surprisingly comfortable, and make your way toward the source of the commotion. You find Columbus standing in the center of a group of sailors and villagers holding something small in his palm that catches the morning light. His eyes shine with the same intensity that sustained him through months of ocean sailing, but now focused on this tiny object rather than distant horizons. "Gold," he announces as you approach, his voice carrying triumph and vindication. "Do you see this? The natives have gold." You move closer to examine what he's holding. It is indeed a small piece of gold, a delicate ornament perhaps meant to be worn as jewelry worked with skill into an intricate pattern that speaks to sophisticated craftsmanship. The workmanship is unlike anything you've seen in European goldsmithing, with flowing lines that seem to echo the natural forms of the island itself. The villager who provided the ornament, an elderly man with intelligent eyes, speaks in his musical language, gesturing toward the interior of the island. Columbus listens intently, though neither man understands the other's words. The captain turns to address the gathered sailors with growing excitement. He speaks of gold in the interior. Columbus declares his interpretation of the gestures, filling in what language cannot provide. There are mines, deposits, wealth beyond imagining. We have found not just the Indies, but the source of Eastern treasure itself. Within the hour, Columbus has organized an expedition to search for the source of the gold. You find yourself part of a group that includes several sailors, the village elder who provided the ornament, and a handful of curious villagers who seem amused by the visitors' intense interest in what appears to be to them simply one material among many. The path leads inland through increasingly dense tropical forest. Giant ferns create cathedral spaces beneath towering trees whose canopy is so thick that the forest floor remains cool and dim even in the heat of the day. Vines with flowers unlike anything in Europe hang from the branches overhead, filling the air with perfumes that change as you walk deeper into this green world. Your feet find their rhythm on paths that have been worn smooth by generations of use. The villagers move with easy familiarity through terrain that challenges your European eyes. They step confidently over roots that you have to examine carefully, duck under low branches that they navigate without thought, cross small streams on rocks that they've obviously used as stepping stones countless times before. As the morning progresses and the search party ventures deeper into the island's interior, you begin to realize that Columbus's expectations and the reality of the situation may not align as neatly as he believes. The villagers, while happy to share their knowledge of the island, don't show the kind of excitement about gold that you might expect from people sitting on vast mineral wealth. When the group stops to rest beside a clear stream, you watch the village elder demonstrate panning techniques in the shallow water. He scoops sand and pebbles into a woven basket, swirls it carefully, and indeed produces several small flakes of gold that gleam in the dappled sunlight filtering through the forest canopy. "You see," Columbus says with satisfaction, collecting the tiny flakes carefully. "This confirms everything I suspected. We have reached the gold-bearing islands of the Indies, just as Marco Polo described them. But you notice something that seems to escape the captain's attention. The villagers treat this gold panning as a casual activity, something done when convenient rather than the focused, intensive mining operation you might expect if gold were the primary source of their wealth. They seem more interested in pointing out edible plants and useful building materials than in conducting an exhaustive search for precious metals. As the day wears on, your search party does indeed find gold, small amounts scattered here and there, enough to confirm that the metal exists on the island, but hardly the vast deposits that Columbus's enthusiasm suggests. You find yourself doing more digging than discovering, spending long hours moving sand and soil in hopes of uncovering significant deposits. By late afternoon, your hands are dirty, your back is sore, and your collection of gold amounts to a handful of small flakes and one modest nugget about the size of a bean. The other sailors have had similar luck, enough to prove that gold exists here, but not enough to justify dreams of imminent wealth. It's while you're sitting beside yet another hole in the sandy soil examining your meager findings that the amusing irony of the situation really strikes you. You dig up a sweet potato that one of your excavations has accidentally unearthed, a large, healthy specimen with orange flesh that you've learned makes excellent eating. Well, you mutter to yourself, holding the sweet potato in one hand and your small collection of gold flakes in the other. Columbus still claims this is Indian treasure, but we're about to change our title from gold hunters to potato farmers. The thought makes you chuckle, especially when you consider that the sweet potato will provide more immediate benefit than the gold flakes. After months of ship food, fresh vegetables have become more precious than any metal, regardless of how highly they're valued in European markets. As the search party prepares to return to the village, Columbus carefully wraps his collection of gold in a piece of cloth, treating each small flake as if it were a significant discovery. His optimism remains unshaken in his mind, finding any gold at all confirms that larger deposits must exist somewhere on the island or nearby islands. This is just the beginning, he tells the group as you make your way back through the forest paths. We have proven that gold exists in these Indies. With proper equipment and more systematic exploration, we will locate the primary deposits. You walk behind the captain carrying your own small collection of gold and the considerably larger sweet potato you've decided to bring back for the evening meal. The villagers chat among themselves in their melodious language, occasionally pointing out interesting features of the forest that have nothing to do with precious metals, fruit trees coming into season, birds with particularly beautiful plumage, flowering vines that fill the air with perfume. As the group emerges from the forest and the village comes back into view with its peaceful gardens and welcoming inhabitants, you find yourself thinking that perhaps the real treasure of this place has nothing to do with gold at all. The wealth here lies in the knowledge of how to live comfortably in harmony with a bountiful natural environment, in the sophisticated techniques for growing food in tropical conditions, in the social structures that seem to allow people to live together without the conflicts that plague European communities. But you keep these thoughts to yourself as Columbus continues to speak enthusiastically about future mining expeditions, because you're beginning to understand that different people can look at the same place and see entirely different kinds of value. The discovery happens quite by accident, as many life-changing discoveries do. You're returning from another day of optimistic gold-seeking in the island's interior when Juan de la Cosa stops abruptly on the forest path, his attention caught by something happening in a clearing just off the main trail. "Look there," he says quietly, gesturing toward a group of villagers gathered in a circle beneath a grove of trees you don't recognize. What are they doing? You follow his gaze and see perhaps a dozen islanders sitting in what appears to be a social gathering. They're passing something from hand to hand, small rolled bundles of dried leaves that they hold to their lips. As you watch, one of the men demonstrates the process. He places one end of the rolled leaves in his mouth, lights the other end with a glowing stick from a small fire, and then breathes deeply, drawing the smoke into his lungs before exhaling it in a long, satisfied stream. "Are they eating fire?" asks Rodrigo, who, despite his encounter with the spicy peppers, has maintained his willingness to try new experiences. The villagers notice your group's interest and, with their characteristic hospitality gesture, for you to join their circle. The man who had been demonstrating the smoking process, a middle-aged islander with intricate tattoos covering his arms, offers one of the rolled leaf bundles to Columbus with a smile and encouraging gestures. Columbus accepts the offering with the diplomatic grace that has served him well in these cultural exchanges. He examines the rolled leaves, carefully noting the skill with which they've been prepared, the way the outer leaf has been wrapped to create a neat, uniform shape. It appears to be some form of ceremonial practice. He observes ever the scholar attempting to understand local customs, perhaps medicinal or related to their religious observances. The tattooed man demonstrates again, showing how to hold the rolled leaves, how to draw the flame to light one end, how to breathe in the resulting smoke. His movements are practiced casual, suggesting that this is a common and enjoyable activity rather than something reserved for special occasions. Rodrigo, never one to back down from a challenge, reaches for one of the prepared leaf rolls. After months of ship food and weeks of digging for gold that doesn't seem to exist in quantity, I'm ready to try whatever these friendly people want to share. He accepts instruction from the tattooed man, who patiently shows him the proper technique. Rodrigo places the roll between his lips, accepts a light from the glowing stick, and draws in his first breath of tobacco smoke. The reaction is immediate and dramatic, though quite different from his encounter with the spicy pepper. Rodrigo's eyes water, he coughs violently, and he bends over as his body rejects this entirely new sensation. The smoke streams from his mouth and nose as he gasps for fresh air. "Mother of Saints," he chokes out between coughs. "It's like breathing a forest fire." The villagers laugh with good-natured amusement. Clearly, they've seen this reaction before from first-time smokers. They offer water and pat Rodrigo on the back with understanding sympathy. But they also encourage him to try again, making gestures that suggest the first experience is always difficult but subsequent attempts will be more pleasant. And remarkably, Rodrigo does try again. Perhaps driven by the same stubborn determination that brought him across an ocean, or maybe just unwilling to be defeated by a simple roll of leaves, he accepts another light and draws more carefully this time, taking smaller breaths and allowing his body to adjust gradually to the sensation. To your amazement, by his third attempt, Rodrigo is managing to smoke the tobacco roll with something approaching pleasure. His coughing subsides, his breathing becomes more controlled, and a look of surprised satisfaction crosses his face. It's actually rather pleasant, he admits, settling back against a tree trunk with the tobacco roll held carefully in his fingers. Strange but pleasant. There's something soothing about it. Word of this new discovery spreads quickly among the sailors. Within hours, a group of your shipmates has joined the smoking circle, each going through the same process of initial rejection, followed by gradual adaptation, and eventually genuine enjoyment. Pedro Gutierrez takes to it with surprising enthusiasm. There's something contemplative about it, he observes, watching smoke drift up through the palm fronds overhead. It encourages quiet thought, peaceful reflection. By the end of the week, the transformation is remarkable. A significant portion of your crew has not only learned to smoke tobacco, but has begun to actively seek out opportunities to do so. They gather in groups during rest periods, sharing rolls of the dried leaves and engaging in the kind of relaxed conversation that the activity seems to encourage. What strikes you as most amusing is how the focus of their daily activities has shifted. Where once these men spent their free time discussing plans for gold exploration or speculating about future wealth, now they seem perfectly content to sit in circles, creating small clouds of aromatic smoke while engaged in leisurely philosophical discussions. You find yourself standing at the edge of one of these smoking circles one afternoon, watching your shipmates as they pass tobacco rolls from hand to hand with the careful attention of men engaged in a ritual of great importance. The scene has an almost dreamlike quality. European sailors who crossed an ocean in search of gold and glory, now sitting peacefully beneath tropical trees exhaling streams of smoke that dissipate into the warm air like prayers or meditations made visible. Is this an expedition? Art you wonder aloud with considerable amusement? Or have we accidentally assembled a team of meat smokers? The question strikes you as perfectly reasonable. These men, who began the voyage as hardened sailors ready to face unknown dangers, now spend their days contentedly producing clouds of aromatic smoke while discussing subjects with the kind of relaxed detachment that seems to be encouraged by their new habit. Not that you're complaining exactly. The tobacco-smoking sailors are certainly more peaceful and contemplative than they were during the tense weeks of ocean crossing. Their conversations are more thoughtful, their disputes fewer, their general demeanor considerably more mellow than you remember from the Santa Maria. But it does represent a rather dramatic shift in priorities. When Columbus announces plans for another gold-seeking expedition, several of the sailors express polite interest, but seem in no particular hurry to leave their comfortable smoking circle. When opportunities arise for exploring other parts of the island, the smokers are happy to participate, but inevitably find reasons to pause frequently for what they've begun calling contemplation breaks. As evening falls and the smoking circle continues its peaceful gathering, you settle down nearby to observe this curious development in your expedition's story. The tobacco smoke drifts up through the darkening air, mixing with the scent of tropical flowers and the distant salt smell of the ocean. The sound of quiet conversation mingles with the evening calls of birds and the gentle rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. Tomorrow, you know, will bring more discoveries, more cultural exchanges, more opportunities to learn about this remarkable place and its people. But tonight, watching your fellow sailors contentedly exhaling streams of smoke while engaged in the kind of philosophical discussions that would have seemed impossible during the stressful weeks of ocean crossing, you find yourself thinking that some discoveries change the people who make them in ways that are more profound than anyone initially realizes. The stars begin to appear overhead, unfamiliar constellations that remind you how far you've traveled from the world you once knew. Somewhere in the distance, Columbus is probably updating his charts and planning tomorrow's explorations, convinced that he's found the Indies and determined to extract maximum benefit from the discovery. But here in the smoking circle, time moves differently. The tobacco seems to encourage a different relationship with both time and place, one that values the present moment, the immediate company, the simple pleasure of shared contemplation under a canopy of tropical trees. Months pass in what feels like a peaceful dream. The rhythm of life on the island becomes as natural as breathing, the warm sunrise filtering through palm fronds, the sound of children's laughter from the village gardens, the evening gatherings where stories are shared in a mixture of Spanish and the local language that everyone gradually learns to understand, if not speak, fluently. But eventually the day comes when Columbus announces that it's time to return to Spain. The Santa Maria's hold has been filled with samples of everything the expedition has discovered, small quantities of gold examples of the remarkable foods you've encountered, specimens of the unusual plants, and carefully preserved samples of the tobacco that has so captivated your fellow sailors. The farewell is unlike anything in your experience. The villagers gather on the beach where you first landed, bringing gifts for the departing visitors, woven textiles, carved ornaments, carefully prepared foods for the long journey home, and bundles of tobacco leaves for the sailors who have become so fond of them. Ayana, your language teacher and friend, presses a small carved pendant into your hands. It's made from some beautiful local wood and shaped into a design that represents, she explains through gestures and the words you've learned, safe travel over water. The pendant is warm from her hands and carries a faint scent of the aromatic oils used in its carving. Adios, Miguel, she says, using the Spanish word for goodbye that you've taught her. Her pronunciation is careful and precise, and her smile carries both sadness at the parting and warmth that you'll carry with you across whatever oceans lie ahead. Adios, Ayana, you reply, then add in her language the words she taught you for until we meet again. Your pronunciation still makes her smile, but it's a smile of affection rather than amusement. As the ship's boats carry you away from the beach for the final time, you stand at the stern watching the island gradually shrink toward the horizon. The villagers remain on the shore, waving their figures growing smaller, but their farewell gestures visible until distance finally makes them impossible to distinguish. The journey back to Spain passes much more quickly than the westward voyage, though you're not sure if this is because you now know the way is possible or because your mind is occupied with processing everything you've experienced. The familiar routine of shipboard life, the watches, the meals, the maintenance of rigging and sails, now carries associations with the remarkable adventure you've just completed. The tobacco-smoking sailors continue their contemplative habit during the return voyage, gathering in small groups during off-watch hours to share their dried leaves and engage in the kind of philosophical discussions that have become their signature activity. Their conversations often center on their experiences with the islanders, comparing what they've learned about different ways of living with their European assumptions. Columbus spends much of the voyage preparing his report for the Spanish monarchs, carefully cataloging discoveries and mapping the routes for future expeditions. His conviction that he has found the Indies remains unshaken. If anything, it has been reinforced by the successful completion of the voyage and the friendly reception received from the native inhabitants. We have opened a new chapter in the history of Christendom. He tells you one evening as you both stand at the ship's rail, watching the sun set over the Atlantic. These Indies will provide wealth for Spain and opportunities for spreading the faith to lands that have never heard the gospel. You nod respectfully, though your own thoughts about what you've discovered are more complex. Yes, you've found lands of remarkable beauty and resources inhabited by people of sophisticated culture and generous spirits. But whether these are the Indies or something else entirely, and what the long-term consequences of your visit will be for both Europeans and islanders, are questions that seem larger than any one voyage can answer. The Spanish coast appears on the horizon on a March morning that sparkles with the particular clarity of early spring. The familiar outline of European shores brings a mixture of emotions: joy at returning home safely, pride in having participated in a successful expedition, but also a strange sense of loss, as if something essential is being left behind in the vast ocean stretching away behind you. The harbour of Palos de la Frontera, where your voyage began nearly 8 months ago, bustles with activity as news of your return spreads through the port. People gather along the waterfront to see the ships that sailed beyond the western horizon and returned with proof that the ocean does indeed have another side. Columbus disembarks with ceremony appropriate to the magnitude of his achievement. He carries samples of gold examples of the remarkable foods discovered in the Indies, several live parrots that have learned to mimic Spanish words during the voyage, and testimonials to the friendly nature of the peoples encountered in these distant lands. The tobacco bundles carried by the sailors attract immediate attention. The aromatic smoke they produce when burned draws curious crowds, and within days the habit begins to spread among the port population with the same inexorable progression you witnessed among your shipmates. In the weeks following your return, as the excitement of homecoming settles into the routine of life on solid ground, you find yourself often thinking about the experience that has changed your understanding of the world. You've walked on lands that existed only in theory when you left Spain. You've met people whose existence was unknown to European scholars. You've tasted foods that will eventually transform European agriculture and cuisine, though you don't yet realize the full magnitude of these changes. The carved pendant from Ayana hangs around your neck, a tangible reminder of friendships formed across vast differences in language and culture. Sometimes in quiet moments you find yourself trying to imagine what she and the other villagers are doing at that very moment, whether they're tending their gardens, gathering in the evening, smoking circles, or teaching their children the Spanish words they learned from their unexpected visitors. Columbus continues to report that he has found the Indies. And who are you, a simple sailor, to contradict the learned captain's geographic conclusions? But in your heart you suspect that what you've discovered is something even more remarkable than the Indies, a completely new part of the world inhabited by peoples whose ways of life will teach Europe lessons it doesn't yet know it needs to learn. The foods you've brought back, corn, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, tobacco, begin to spread through Spanish society with surprising speed. Within months, you see potatoes being cultivated in local gardens, corn being ground into flour, and tobacco smoking becoming a common sight in taverns and markets. Europe is changing, though the changes are still small enough that most people don't recognize their significance. But you, having witnessed the source of these changes, understand that your voyage has begun a process that will transform both the old world and the new in ways that no one can yet fully comprehend. Years have passed now since that remarkable voyage, and you've settled into the quiet life of a man who has seen wonders that most people can only imagine. Your small house in Palos overlooks the harbour where the Santa Maria once anchored, and sometimes on clear evenings you stand at your window watching the ships come and go, remembering the morning when you sailed toward the western horizon with no certain knowledge of what lay beyond. The carved pendant still hangs around your neck, though the wood has darkened with age and wear. Sometimes when you hold it in your hands, you can almost smell the tropical flowers and hear the sound of waves on a pristine beach thousands of miles away. Ayana's face has become softer in your memory, like a painting viewed through morning mist, but her smile remains as clear as if she were standing beside you. Columbus never returned from his fourth voyage to what he continued to call the Indies. The news of his death reached Spain just as the magnitude of his discovery was beginning to be understood. The lands he found were indeed new worlds, continents, whose existence had been unknown to European scholars, inhabited by peoples whose civilizations rivaled anything in the Old World. The foods you brought back have become commonplace now. Potatoes grow in fields throughout Spain, corn has become a staple crop, and tobacco. Well, tobacco has become so popular that ships make regular voyages to the Caribbean islands just to supply European demand. The sailors' smoking circles you remember from that distant beach have evolved into a habit that spans continents. Tonight, as you settle into your comfortable chair by the window, a cup of wine made from familiar Spanish grapes in your hands, you find your thoughts drifting back to that incredible adventure. The house is quiet around you, a good quiet, the peaceful silence of a man who has lived a full life and is content with his memories. Outside, the evening air carries the scent of the sea, mixed with aromas from kitchen gardens, where families grow the new vegetables that have enriched European tables beyond anything your generation could have imagined. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the sound of laughter from a tavern, where sailors share stories of their own adventures on increasingly familiar oceans. Your body has aged since that voyage. Your hands are more weathered, your joints stiffer on cold mornings, your hair grey where it was once brown. But your mind remains clear, and the memories of that remarkable journey are as vivid as if they happened yesterday instead of decades ago. You remember the feel of warm sand between your toes on that first morning when you walked on an unknown beach, the taste of fresh fruit after months of ship food, the sound of Ayana's laughter when you mispronounced words in her language, the sight of your fellow sailors sitting peacefully in their smoking circles, creating small clouds that drifted up through tropical trees toward unfamiliar stars. What strikes you most as you sit in the peaceful evening contemplating that long-ago adventure is how the voyage changed not just maps and trade routes, but the daily lives of ordinary people in ways both large and small. Every meal now includes foods that were unknown to Europe before your voyage. Every market sells goods that would have been inconceivable to your parents' generation. Every ship that sails westward follows routes that you helped establish when the Atlantic was still a mystery. But perhaps more importantly, the voyage changed the sailors who made it in ways that had nothing to do with fame or fortune. You learned that the world is larger and more wonderful than you had ever imagined, that different ways of living can be equally valid, that kindness and curiosity are universal languages that need no translation. You learned too that some of the most important discoveries are the quiet ones, the realization that happiness can be found in simple things, that friendship can bridge any cultural divide, that the journey itself can be as valuable as the destination. As the evening deepens and the first stars appear in the darkening sky, you feel that familiar, peaceful drowsiness that comes at the end of a day well lived. Your wine cup is empty, your memories are warm and comforting, and the carved pendant around your neck seems to carry still the distant scent of tropical flowers. You rise from your chair, moving slowly but without pain, and make your way toward your bed. The simple furniture around you, the wooden table, the woven blankets, the oil lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls, creates an atmosphere of comfort and security that reflects a life well lived. As you settle beneath familiar quilts, your head resting on a pillow stuffed with down from European geese, you close your eyes and allow your mind to drift back one final time to that remarkable adventure. You see again the vast blue ocean stretching away toward unknown horizons. Feel again the excitement of discovering that the world is far larger and more wonderful than anyone had dared to imagine. But what you remember most clearly as sleep begins to claim you is not the gold or the glory, but the simple human connections that made the entire voyage meaningful. The friendship offered by people who had no reason to trust strangers from across the ocean, the shared meals that became lessons in the universal nature of hospitality, the laughter that needed no translation, and the kindness that transcended all barriers of language and culture. Your breathing slows and deepens, matching the eternal rhythm of waves against distant shores. The pendant around your neck rises and falls gently, with each breath a small anchor, connecting your dreams to memories of that incredible adventure, when 3 small ships carried brave souls into the unknown and returned with proof that the world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Outside your window, the harbor sleeps peacefully under familiar stars. Ships rock gently at their moorings, their masts swaying in the night breeze, like tall trees in a forest. The sound of water lapping against the dock mingles with the soft whisper of wind through rigging, creating a lullaby that speaks of oceans crossed and adventures completed. And as you drift into sleep, your last conscious thought is the one that has brought you comfort for all these years. Since that remarkable voyage, that you were there, that you were part of something extraordinary, that you helped write a chapter in the great story of human courage and curiosity that will be told as long as there are sailors willing to sail toward unknown horizons. The longest, strangest, and most wonderful voyage of your life lives on, in dreams that smell of tropical flowers and sound like waves on pristine beaches, where friends wait with warm smiles, and the promise that some discoveries change, not just the world, but the hearts of those brave enough to make them. Sleep comes peacefully carrying you toward dreams of endless blue waters and distant shores, where adventure waits for those bold enough to sail beyond the edge of all known maps into the vast, welcoming mystery of the unknown world.